This painting started with wax, which is probably not where you expected this story to begin. But then again, I've never been particularly interested in making things the normal way. I build the figures first, light them, photograph them, and then paint from what I've created. So before this was an oil painting, it was a little collection of wax, string, light, and questionable amounts of patience. The figures are the beginning of the image, but they're not really sculptures in the traditional sense. I'm using them to construct a situation. I can move an arm 3 inches and suddenly the entire composition changes, which is considerably easier to do with wax than with a person. It's cheating, but I'll allow it. Although people are generally better at holding still. Usually. I'm looking at the relationships between the figures, the spaces between them, the direction they're moving, and where the light is going to hit. I'm also thinking about what I want the eye to do once the image becomes a painting. I don't want everything competing for attention. I want movement, I want pauses, I want some things to announce themselves, and other things to lurk. The light is a huge part of this process. I'm not just lighting the figures so I can see them, I'm lighting them to create the information I need for the painting. Where does the form turn? Where does it disappear? Where does the shadow become more interesting than the things casting it? That's all going to matter later. Because once I start a painting, I'm not inventing those forms from scratch. I've already built them, I've already lit them, I've already made the decision about where I want the drama to happen. The canvas is where I get to translate all of that. Then comes the underpainting. And yes, I've already talked about this quite a bit, so I'm not going to make you sit through another lecture about why brown paint is secretly the hero of civilization. The important thing is that the structure is established here. The composition, the values, the movement, the big relationships. By the time I start adding color, I already know where I'm going. That's important to me. I'm not wandering around the canvas hoping something interesting happens. I'm building towards something that I've already envisioned. Now we get to the color. And this is where the painting starts looking considerably more like itself. I'm working with the big relationships first. I'm not interested in finishing one little area while the rest of the canvas sits around looking neglected. Everything needs to develop together. The figures have to belong to the space, the background has to support the figures without becoming wallpaper, and the bubbles, because apparently bubbles have become an important part of my professional life, have to do more than just float around looking cute. They're part of the movement, they're little interruptions, they help pull the eye through the composition, and they're also just fun. Once the major color relationships are working, I can start pushing the forms. This is where I'm looking at how the light wraps around things, where an edge should be sharp, where it should disappear, where I want the surface to feel almost physical. I like having that tension in the work, something that looks very carefully observed, but is also clearly not a straightforward depiction of reality. The figures began as these little odd constructions in the studio. Now I'm trying to preserve some of that oddness while making them feel completely present in the painted space. There's something I really like about making a painting this way. I start with something very physical, which is wax, light, actual objects sitting in an actual room, and then I turn it into something that doesn't really exist anywhere except on the canvas. That's the part I'm interested in, the transition. Reality gives me the information, painting gives me permission to mess with it. I can exaggerate, I can simplify, I can make something stranger, I can push the color, I can make the light behave slightly badly. The goal isn't to reproduce what was in front of me, it's to make something of my own from it. At this point, the painting is getting close. The original vision is still there. Actually, it's clearer now. That's one of the things I like about working this way. The more information I put on the canvas, the more specific the idea becomes. And once I can really see the whole thing, I can start making the final decisions. There is one fairly significant compositional change coming. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to paint over it.